It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Wednesday, February 21st, and so happy for you joining us. We are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have Health is Happiness, the Bible history word study, and of course commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. All right, everyone, how are you doing? Yes, it is a wonderful Wednesday. We've reached hump day, the middle of the week. Hope you guys have enjoyed your week thus far. Don't forget, tomorrow we have Q&A Thursday, so get those questions into me as soon as possible. If you haven't yet, leave a like and comment to build our community. Just super happy for everyone joining us every weekday on the Morning Star Drive. So let's get up and support each other each and every day. This week's Sunday message title: it's to have correct perception. It's to check perfectly and be someone who has nothing to do with sin. Yes, everyone, it is Wednesday. I hope that you guys have had a wonderful, awesome week thus far. Yes, it's already the 21st, which means we have exactly 8 days left before the end of February, and we're already in March. Man, it's just around the corner. Those of you guys who checked my Instagram yesterday, man, what a tough day for... Well, actually, it wasn't too tough, but if there's anything that happens to me in Malaysia that is consistent, it is car troubles. Did you guys see it? Yeah. For some reason, for me, there are always car problems in Malaysia. Always. And I don't think it's because... I'm not looking at this as oh my gosh, maybe God is trying to say something to me like this or that. And of course, God can say things to me in many different situations, like, oh, am I being judged or whatever it is. But most of the cars I use, they're not new cars, right? They're older cars. They need servicing. I drive a lot. So for those of you guys who don't know how much I drive, every day, I'm probably driving around, I would say anywhere from 70 to 90 kilometers per day, right? And then, of course, that's not including my trips to the airport, taking people around. So in the last 2 months, I've had a lot of guests come over and stuff. Last 2 months, I've traveled over 7,000 kilometers. So 60 days, 7,000 kilometers. It's pretty intense, right? So, it's part of it because, taking guests around, picking them up, doing this and that. And it's something that I really, I'm thankful that I'm able to do too, so that people can really have a wonderful and amazing stay here. But, man, I'm so thankful to God about yesterday's car troubles, meaning not that I'm thankful that I had car troubles, but I was able to assess the car trouble quickly. Now, what does that mean? So what happened was I was meeting some friends for dinner, but I went really early. We're talking more than 3 hours early, going to head to a cafe, just rest and relax for a little bit before I go out, right? So I was about to drive out to a cafe before meeting friends for dinner, right? And for some reason, as I start the car, I'm used to starting the car, air conditioning it kicks in. But for some reason, the AC wasn't working, and it was only hot air, just hot air coming out. And interestingly, this is something that's happened to me before with another car. Right? So, and air conditioning is a must in Malaysia too. It's just so hot all the time, right? So I remember this exact situation about 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, I thought to myself maybe the air conditioning's down. Oh, maybe that's just what's happening. But later on, the entire car stalled and overheated, and it was because of the radiator and the water. There was a leak with the water and stuff like that. Something to do with the radiator, right? Because the radiator is where you put the water in so it cools the engine down. So I was like, man, I've seen this before. And about 5 minutes into the drive, I was just like, you know what? I got to pull over. So I pulled over to a gas station, right? And I opened the hood, and I looked and I recorded it. There is steam coming out of one of the hoses connected to the radiator. So you just hear this tss, and all this hot steam is coming out. And it just I think it was 5-6 minutes just constantly spewing that steam. And I was like, man, where can I find a mechanic? I walked across the street. Luckily, there was a mechanic right there, okay? And came over, took a look at it, and says, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I see. I'll order the hose, and we'll fix it right away. And I think, they waited for the hose to come in, and a guy came over and just fixed the hose within I think he did it within 15 minutes. It was really, really quick. Within 15 minutes, replaces the hose, and man, like it was starting perfect. Everything was good. Air conditioning was working even better than before, so I was so thankful about that. But one thing that I noticed was after he fixed the hose. Remember, I was telling you he's pouring water into the radiator, and he was pouring so much water into it, he had to like fill the water bottle up again. And I was like, wow, he's like, oh yeah, like the water's really low. And I realized how close the car was to just shutting down. So I was super thankful because, the last time this happened, the car like basically overheated and broke down in the middle of a busy street. I felt so terrible. Like that was 2 years ago. But the thing that was quite amazing for me is this. This story is like totally helps me to realize even more deeply about the power of the principle of repeating history. And it's like, man, like because things are the same, like engines are built the same way. And if we go through similar experiences, we've become wiser because of it. And I was like, man, we learn things really, really quickly. Even though that thing was 2 years ago, I was like, wow, I was really able to get, to make sure that I wasn't stuck on the middle of the road or God forbid, the highway or something like that. And this is the first time this kind of thing happened. And I wasn't, that was the first time 2 years ago. And like I said, I was telling you before that I just thought the air conditioning was broken, so I just kept driving until it was overheated, right? But this time, because I had the exact same experience where the air conditioning was spewing hot air into the car, I had to open the doors. I was like, yeah, you know what? I've seen this before. Let me pull over before it gets even worse. And, just on the spot, because I've been through the exact same thing, I was able to diagnose quickly and get it solved before I caused more damage or embarrassment of being stuck in the middle of the highway. And all these cars are like, I caused traffic because I didn't, I didn't know what was going on. So, I was so thankful because, everything all together, all the time combined, I think it all finished within 45 minutes. I was back on the road again. And I was just so thankful to God for the past experience. And, it makes me think about a lot of the times when we go through difficulties too. Like we're going through difficulties all the time. Last year was crazy, but one of the things we cannot forget is if you forget, you will die. The one thing we cannot forget is the experience that we went through and not doing the same thing over again, right? It's the same thing as in, hey guys, we hear some bad news about, like yesterday we talked about like that article about Pastor Bumsuck. Or, sometimes I'm going to hear bad things about me. Sometimes I'm going to hear bad things about other people, right? And the thing that we have to understand is we cannot take things at face value. Everything's got to be checked. Because the moment you start to believe something when you haven't checked it, what happens? Then you start to have bad perceptions. And then you start, you put yourself through pain and suffering that you don't need to go through, right? So when I was looking at this, I was like, oh, that's so true. And we have to be really careful about this thing too. So when I was thinking about this, I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. And because of the past, I was able to diagnose and be able to make the right decisions yesterday, so I didn't make the same mistakes as the past and I didn't go through more suffering and pain, right? And in the same way too, guys, we're gonna, these trials are still going on. A lot of things are happening back and forth, right? And, we're not at the end of the slandering and persecution. We're not at the end of anything. So what does that mean? It means that we have to be even more vigilant. We have to be even more careful, realizing we've seen this before. Don't believe everything you've heard and said until it's actually checked, right? Yesterday was the prime example, right? When the media puts KJS and Pastor Bumsuck in the same category, for those of us who checked and waited, we cannot put both of them in the same category because we don't know about Pastor Bumsuck's situation. We can't. Even with KJS, we waited for the information to come out before we realized, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is bad. The lifestyle she was living, the money that she took, or this and that. Like these are things we're like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. So then we have rightfully a bad view of KJS and what she did. Now, with Pastor Bumsuck and the trust that we have in the media, especially the Korean media at this moment right now, There's nothing that there's no more information. We don't know where the money came from, and that's okay. That's okay for now. We're not going to assume and say that, oh, he did illegitimate means. Like, we can't. Just like last year, we have to be those that wait on new information. There's no new information yet, right? Like, even if I ask questions like, oh, what job does he have right now? What happened to his old business? What happens here? What happened there? What happened here? And you kind of, eventually the truth will come out. And if it's bad, like, let me tell you the biggest difference between what could possibly happen, what could possibly not happen, right? Like, for me is, I'm waiting for more information, and that's fine. Now, what happens, right? Let's just say that it happened through illegitimate means. Remember, this is a mental exercise. For the mental exercise, if it did happen through illegitimate means, I would still have to look at what he's doing right now. You know what I mean? Like, I would have to look at that and say, okay, so if it was done in this way, right, yet he repents, yet he is still, like, he doesn't go off and start slandering Sunsim and stuff like that too, like what happened with KJS, for us, we are people that understand that God is a merciful God, and if someone is truly repentant, that there is going to be forgiveness, right? People have to pay for their sins, obviously, but we have to understand the full scope of the situation. Personally, I have no idea what is going on, like with the land and stuff like that. It could look fishy, but there's nothing for us to go off of. It's just an article. And they're just stating some fact that there is some land. And that's it. It doesn't say that, where the money came from. It doesn't say anything like it was illegitimate or illegal, right? There is no lawsuit, right? And, so there's a lot of things that we're looking at like, oh, okay, so wait and see. And I'm saying this to you guys, same thing's going to happen all the time. People are going to talk. And like one thing that I think that we have to watch as people who are members of this history is don't assume or judge a situation before knowing clearly. That's like this week's message, checking his life. If you see something and you think it's bad, don't say anything because you got to check it. Make a double check, triple check, because what if you start spreading rumors that aren't true? Right? We have to be those, especially this week's message. Checking is that important. Checking is life. We all knew this is something there. You can't just see something, say or think that it's a bad thing, talk to other people about it, and then all of a sudden it's going to be like, oh, okay, well, this is what it means. And the answer is, how do you know? Right? So it's something that we really have to think about, and I hope it's this checking is life. Is something that is that big and that important for all of us too. All right. So yeah, that's one of the things that I realized through this situation with my car breaking down. Also, like I was telling you before, I can't believe we're in the last week of February. Last week of February, heading straight into March. March 16th is around the corner. And, March 16th, I think sometimes we have lost the value of March 16th. And I hope that we can all prepare well together, commemorate the greatest day in human history, and let's make God happy on that day and also welcome the new members into this day of Rapture. Rapture, it feels like it was so long ago. And then when you check the date of 3/16/2015, that's 9 years ago. That is a long time ago. It really is. Right? And even I can remember vividly all the preparation we did for that Rapture Day, all the conditions that we set, 1 a.m. prayers, this and that, the 70 days, 110 days, all these conditions that we set. And now we fast forward 9 years later. And it's so crazy the state of this history is in right now. I don't think anyone would have thought that 9 years after the Rapture Day, we would be in this type of situation, very, very similar to 2008. Like, I think it's so surreal. And I think it's something that is so unbelievable that we are in this type of situation again, right? But of course, we learned through the word that tribulation and hardships, it makes us stronger, it makes us work harder, but it also gets us to our destination faster. And when I started to think about it, I was like, yeah, it's true, right? What Sunseem said is true. The tribulations, the hardships, difficulties, they'll bring us to our destination faster. But when I think about this, right? So I thought this to myself. I was like, okay, well, if tribulation and hardship gets us to our destination faster, then wouldn't God want things like the cross to be predestined? Wouldn't he want like really terrible tribulations to happen so that we can reach our destination faster? Right? Like I thought that I was like, yeah, if that's the case, God, why wouldn't you want difficulties? You would be like throwing difficulties in our life so we can reach our destination quicker. But then I started to remember the conflict in ignorance lecture. Right? You guys, conflict in ignorance lecture. Remember, there's the second attempt history, where you have the three triangle chart. But when people fail their responsibility, then a fourth triangle is added for the second history or the second attempt to happen. And in that lesson, you always learn the second history or the second attempt is always harder, more difficult, and conditions are much bigger because you failed the first time. Right? Now, when you learn that lesson about the second attempt in the conflict in ignorance, the first attempt is always the easier way and the way that is more powerful. It is the ideal way, right? All Josiah had to do was let King Necho through Israel to go to Carchemish. That's it. That's all he had to do, and then he would have been the top 3 countries in that Neo-Assyrian Egyptian empire. That's all he needs to do. Something so easy where he doesn't have to fight, just lets Egypt walk through Israel so they can get to Carchemish much more quickly. It's easy. But since he couldn't, what happens was Babylonians defeat Egypt and Assyria. And then, Babylonians defeat them, and then they get taken over, and then their second attempt is like going into the Roman Empire. The first attempt is always the easiest and the most powerful way. The second attempt only happens because the first attempt failed, because the people of God could not fulfill their responsibilities, so there was an actual failure. So the second attempt is like the cross and the need for a great sin to be forgiven. But that first attempt was not just any first attempt. That first attempt would have been Jesus preaching, the people accepting, the gospel spreading around Israel, and from there, they spread the gospel to the ends of the earth. And that, of course, it's still hard. Of course, there's still going to be difficulties and tribulations, but it's not going to be as hard as going to the cross. The cross happened because the first attempt failed. And then the second attempt is necessary because what happens is because we couldn't get it through the first attempt, we've lost so much ground that we need a harsh tribulation to push us forward to catch up to what it would have been like at the first attempt. The harsh tribulation comes in to make us cover that ground quicker so that we can be back to where we were before. It's the second attempt that we are constantly in that is always harder, more difficult, and stronger. And it's actually quite sad that we have to continually reach the second attempt and go through deep and heavy tribulation and reach our destination in this way. And it made me realize is like, wow, like we could have been so much better. We really could have been so much better than where we are right now. And when I thought about this, is like, we didn't have to go through tribulations this difficult and this hard, but we did. And because we did, this is why we're here right now. And it's really, really kind of a sad history. It is. And as Sunseem said, like even in the past and even now, the biggest mistake that was made is not actually the world itself, but it's actually the people following who made the biggest mistake, who were not convicted as they should have been, who are not as great as they should be. That's where the biggest problem was, that they should have testified more. They should have believed even more. They should have put their lives on the line. And if they did, none of these things would have happened. Like one thing that Sunseem said that a lot of people may not understand or recognize, Sunseem should have been announced to the world in 1999. And you're like, 1999 is the beginning of the grave period. And the answer is, yeah, it is. It is the beginning of the grave period. And guess what? If there is an announcement for Sunsee's mission in 1999, of course there's going to be tribulation for the next 3.5 years. But that would all lead to a resurrected period from 2002 where the history of God would have been so much better. There wouldn't be the 10 years in prison. All these things wouldn't have happened because we would have done things properly from 1999. And that is something we do have to recognize really well, right? We're constantly in a second attempt, because we could not do it right the first time. So when I started to think more deeply about this really made me start to think deeply. I was like, whoa, like that's crazy. That really is. And just to think that, it's the disciples, it's us, the people following. We should have been so much better. We should have testified better and more. And we would have been in a much different situation now than it is at this moment. So for me, I was just like, ugh. Yeah, it's something that we learned during the Rapture, during the time of the Rapture, the mistakes that we made and how much better we need to do, realizing how valuable the man of mission is for setting the conditions so that we can go. How much have we failed? Well, as much as we want to blame KJS for a lot of the problems, she's symbolic of us. Right? That's the one thing I think we forget is she is symbolic of us, the brides. Remember, even at the time of Adam and Eve, who were Adam and Eve? They were considered the best of that time period. And what Sunseem said is, as being the representatives, if they can't do it, no one can do it. They are the best of the best. If you take the worst of the worst, then everyone could say, oh, I could have done it. I could have done what they did. But when you take the best of the best, no one can complain. It's just like going to the World Cup. Going to the World Cup with your best national players. Yeah, you take the best, and if they lose, you can't complain because they're the best. You couldn't do better than them in soccer. You couldn't do better than them in hockey or baseball or football or whatever it is. You can't do better than them. And as hard as this may be for us to admit, you think restored Eden, where God chooses the Adam and Eve of this time period, that God didn't choose the best of the best? We can't complain. And the more you start talking trash, let's say about too much about KJS, you're actually talking about yourself. Because if she's considered the best of the best and she couldn't do it, guess what? If you were put in that position, you would not be able to do it. It's really interesting when you learn the words really deeply, especially the 30 lessons, everything comes into oh, that makes sense. Oh yeah, we did learn this. How do we put that into reality? Well, reality is when we learned the fall lesson, Adam and Eve were the representatives, the best of their time period. And if they fail, no one could do it, which means it's the exact same thing when we have the restored Eden today, during the time of the Rapture with the restored Adam and Eve. It's the best of the best, and she symbolizes us. She couldn't do it, which means, can anyone else complain? Can anyone else say, oh my gosh, I can't believe she couldn't do it? And the answer is no. You can kick and scream as much as you want, but I guarantee you, from all the principles we've learned, if KJS couldn't do it, not a single one of you out there could do what she did. You would have an even harder time with the temptations she went through, whether it's money or opposite sex or all these other different things like that. So that's why we have to take responsibility. We do. We've got to take responsibility for what we've done. And that's something that we have to kind of open our hearts to and say, wow, we can't sit there and just blame her the entire time. We can't. It's not going to work. And that's why we have to be better. We have to be greater. We have to be, we have to convict our hearts and our minds to get to that point right now that, hey, guess what? Even though all this junk has happened, we've got to reach a new level. We really do. So for me, it was something that I really thought was an important thing to talk about, especially a lot of times, we kind of like to do the blame game. We blame the others, but in the reality is, what did we do? Right? A poll. I haven't put up this poll yet, but yeah, there's a poll. It's a little bit late, but this is a kind of a fun poll. A lot of serious talk going on, so I'm going to do a really, really fun poll. So what is this fun poll? Which boy band is your generation, or the one that best fits you? The boy, because I'm totally into boy bands and stuff, right? So I got 5 of the probably top boy bands ever, which is like One Direction for the most current generation. You have Westlife, Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, and New Kids on the Block, right? Many of you out there probably don't know who New Kids on the Block were, but they were probably the first boy band that were like the original boy band that everyone's like, oh my gosh, they're the ones kind of thing, right? So I'm going to put that post in there. Just a fun one for this week. It's already Wednesday and stuff, so go ahead, write down the one that you think. I want you to comment too. Comment on why did you like your boy band better, or what is the favorite song of your boy band, right? Everyone knows my favorite boy band, obviously, right? But for you guys, I want to know what your favorite boy band is, and of your boy band, in the comments, just kind of write down your favorite song from your favorite boy band, okay? So before we get into Bible history, word study, let's get into the first break of the day.
I swear everything say is hard to hear. Nothing makes sense when you try to sound like nothing sounding clear. Don't get me started, I'm ready for war. I got that truth that's like a fire. Play no games, always in range. I bring that sword like a messiah. I got no worries, I'm a warrior, I'm a fighter, like Chuck Norris. I got keys to what I say. Watch me talk, look at my storage. I got ammo, I know the word, don't come too close. I'm loading my gun. People disbelieve in me, don't stand a chance. And to all my enemies, don't stand a chance. Hush, hush, cause I'm just heating up. If they keep on talking, I'ma burn them up. People disbelieve in me, don't stand a chance. And to all my enemies, don't stand a chance. Hush, hush, cause I'm just heating up. If they keep on talking, I'ma burn them up. Not a chance, you can't be slipping. On a mission, got the vision. Always cooking, know I'm mixing. Hot and ready, time to dish it. Loading up the ammunition. What's the point of saving when they all around you? People change night and day like icy hot. Don't know who's switching around you. Don't be like those ones who say they will go to the end, but really they don't go to the end. If you don't keep your position, end up like that angel that really fell to the end. Everybody wants to eat, not many wanna hunt. Think about that real quick. Life is all about decisions. You wanna be great, what are you willing to give? On another one, I'm not gonna stop. On another one, my mission don't stop. Trying to put out this flame, but you not. When you say my name, gon' be at the top. Got that flame, they don't wanna smoke no. Cooking all cities in the chokehold. You be burning up, no joke bros. I'm a dragon on a beat, like all blow. This world is full of fantasies and find out. Spinning all about reality. The word is what keeps me going. That's why I'm never stopping. One, I'm proud of me. Live by the truth, never fake it, huh? Destroying the forces of evil, huh? Got the fire, so you know what's up. Hit them hard, call it Falcon Punch. People disbelieve in me, don't stand a chance. And to all my enemies, don't stand a chance. Hush, hush, cause I'm just heating up. If they keep on talking, I'ma burn them up. People disbelieve in me, don't stand a chance. And to all my enemies, don't stand a chance. Hush, hush, cause I'm just heating up. If they keep on talking, I'ma burn them up.
All right, so let's get into today's word study. And every Wednesday nowadays, we have started the new Bible history segment for the Morning Star Drive, and we did go over Genesis chapter 1 through 5. And now as we get into the judgment of the flood at Noah's time, it gets a little bit more detailed because there are a lot of questions that come in. So I was even looking at what to talk about, and I almost have to go through like almost every single verse. Like there's a ton of stuff in this. Okay, so let's start off with Genesis chapter 6. And it talks about when human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them. Here's verse 2, which is the very first verse that when we read, there's always a question about this. It says, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. right? And this is a very big question of the sons of God and the daughters of men, okay? And of course, this is a parable or a metaphor or symbolism for people who are of God and of the world or of man, right? And we would say that this would be very close to how the Old Testament talks about mixed marriages. Okay, so if you go into like parts of the Old Testament, like say Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 3, it talks about do not intermarry with other people, do not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons, right? And back in the Old Testament time, remember, the Old Testament time is a very physical time, so the lineage of the Israelites was that big and that important, right? Because it's a physical time, the physical lineage makes a huge difference. Right? Do not intermarry with other people. But the one things you have to understand, like a lot of people will say that, oh, this means the Bible says no interracial marriages. And it completely does not say that. It is not talking about interracial marriages. It is talking about people back in those days. The people all believed in a certain God from a certain region. Right? So if you mixed with other peoples, what's happening is you're mixing the faith of God with other idols and other idol worship, right? So there's not talking about interracial, like you can't have a black and a white person marrying, or an Asian and a white, or an Asian and a black, or whatever it is. It's nothing to do with that. It's about taking in other people with different gods and idols. And back then in that culture, people were synonymous with their religion, where today is just because I'm Asian doesn't mean I'm Buddhist, right? Just because I'm from Tibet doesn't mean I'm like a Buddhist monk or Tibetan monk. Just because I'm from America, I'm not Christian. Just be, like there's so many things out there where the people and the religion is not synonymous with each other like it was way back then, right? So to mix the people back in those days was the same as mixing religion and mixing beliefs. Now, so mixed marriages, it means mixed faith marriages are not allowed, right? That's what it's really saying about mixed faith marriages, because that's what it's implying. But of course, in the Bible, there are cases, and it's like, well, if you can't have mixed marriages, then why does Paul talk about, like in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul's like going, hey, if you're married to an unbeliever, then you can leave them if they don't want to be with you, or you can divorce them, or if they're okay with it, then you stay with them. So then and we're like, wait, but Paul says you can stay mixed marriages. And what Paul is actually, the situation Paul talks about is not you going out and finding a spouse that is of another religion. This isn't the case of like a JS, where they're already married, one of them becomes a Christian, and this is the situation that Paul is actually talking about. It's not about before you get married, go out and find someone of a different faith. It's about people who are already married in that situation like a JS, and they're going to deal with what if the other spouse does not want to believe, right? But they're okay with it. Can you divorce? Can you not, right? So it's something where we have to understand the sons of God and daughters of men is not talking about it in mixed marriages way, like interracial. It's talking about mixed faith marriages, right? And that's what's happening, where the sons of God, the people who believe, the people who are good and righteous, are mixing in with those of the daughters of men, or the daughters who are more worldly, who are of other idols and other idol worship and stuff like this too. So, sometimes the former faith will say that the sons of God is actually talking about angels, right? And, this is actually something that really proves part of our point of, when you get into the lecture, what lecture is it, where it talks about, angels, right? That angels are at the level of children, right? Because there are some verses that we read is like, the level of angels is children. So the sons of God must be talking about angels, right? That angels, spiritual angels, came down to the earth and had intercourse with physical human beings, which obviously doesn't make sense at all, because angels are spirits and humans are physical beings, right? So that's kind of like some of the things that we have to understand when it comes to that. Now, the next thing is verse 3. Look, I'm only on verse 3 right now. It says, after, God talks about the interfaith marriages, God says, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. Now, this is also a big misinterpretation, and people say that, oh, this means human beings can only live to 120 years old and God has set the limit for it. And of course, we've seen people who have, even after the time of Noah, even Noah lived to 600, right? Yeah, no, it doesn't mean that it's only, human beings can only live to 120 years old. We've already debunked that because there's people who've lived over 120 years old. What does it actually mean? It means that when God says he's talking to all humankind right now, or to the people he's talking to in that region, he says, guess what? It's so bad right now, I cannot put up with you. So guess what? You have 120 years left before the flood comes. So it's God basically telling the people 120 years before the flood actually comes. It does not mean that human beings can only live to 120 years old. It means that human beings have 120 years left before the flood comes. Right? But of course, as we go into the interpretation, for just Noah and the flood, the 120 years is not literal 120 years. It's 1 year for every month, so it's about 10 years. Okay? So that's another thing that we need to debunk or contend with. Now, verse 4 talks about a group of people which are the fruits, the children of the sons of God and daughters of men, and they're called the Nephilim. Right? The Nephilim, whichever way that you're going to pronounce it. And it's basically the fruits of the sons of God and daughters of men, and the Nephilim. And they were considered giants, okay? So, we also know that this is quite ridiculous that there were giants back then, like literal giants. There were not, right? Human beings, remember, repeating history. Are there giants today? And yeah, there are giants. They're in the NBA. They're like 220 centimeters tall. But they're not literal giants, right? It's just a very, very small percentage of the population of the entire world that they're on the extremes of height, right? So we know that, like if people are talking about literal giants, you know that it's crazy talk, right? But it's interesting that the way it was written, it says that, if you read this, it says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards. So the Nephilim at the time of Noah and after, meaning these things were constantly happening. Yes, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that angels were constantly coming down and having sex with people, or it means that people were constantly marrying outside of their religion, making it an impure spiritual line. Right? So that's what the Nephilim actually are. The heroes of men of renown. And one of the things that Sansim did say about the Nephilim, which made them very, very big and powerful, or like giants at that time, is they had information and knowledge of many religions. And they kind of started piecing them together so that they had like this, trying to make like a super religion that kind of contains a bit of this, a bit of that, like a symphony of religion, stuff like that too. So that's quite interesting. I couldn't give you the full details of what Sunsim actually said. So if someone's out there, maybe I'll talk to Pastor Baker about it too. But that's what he said about the Nephilim. Verse 5 said, "The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time." Right? Every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil, wicked, 100% of the time. Right? So what we need to realize here is that this is all a result of the fall. The fall reproduces sin. It multiplies. It is exponential. It becomes exponential as time moves forward, as it keeps multiplying from parent to child, parent to child. That's why you have like Exodus chapter 20 verse 5 says that God will punish the children for the sins of their fathers for 3 to 4 generations. Right? It's not because they did the sin itself. It's because they have the same spiritual blood passed on to them, and they're going to deal with the same types of spiritual sins. Right? So when you look at this, it's like, oh, this is kind of the result of the fall. The fall accelerated evil and wickedness, when if Adam and Eve did what was right, they could have accelerated righteousness instead, right? So when we look at this, it's like, oh, this is what it's saying right here, right? So when you understand this, that was like the exact result of the fall. That like 2 pages into the Bible, God has to already start all over again, right? And if you think about it carefully, it's far better to restart at the beginning than restart after putting in thousands of years of work. You know what I mean? So yeah, doing it at the beginning is much better, okay? Verse 6. Verse 6, I think, is a very, very interesting one because it is, this is the one that kind of shows the love and emotion that God has because of the entire situation. It says, God regrets to have made mankind, right? God regrets to have made mankind, right? The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled, right? Because he's going to do something that, remember, like this week's message in the Proverbs, it's like God says, what was it in the Proverbs? When it's like, what was the exact, I don't have the exact wording on me right now, but because we are one with God, because we are those that are with God, when we sin, that filth, God feels the same filth on himself too, and eventually the only way to get rid of the filth, if we don't repent, is to judge, right? So here is God with all that filth of 1,600 years of people sinning over and over and over again and not repenting. And now he has it all over him that the only way to get rid of it is to judge, and that's going to be through the flood. But it says he regrets to have made mankind on the earth. It shows his heart. Now, does it literally mean that God says, I wish I never created mankind? No, because it's a very, very similar to expression that is used by people today, and it kind of speaks for the heart or the emotional situation at that time. Just like any parent in a similar situation, if their children did something so wicked, so evil, so many people were hurt, destroyed, killed, whatever it is by it, they would say the same thing, that that's what they're feeling right now. I wish they were never born, right? It's kind of showing the emotional side of God at that time, at that moment, right? And that's something that we have to really understand more deeply, is like, oh, this is what God is saying right now at that time, right? So, I've only gone over 6 verses, which are the ones that we need to explain a little bit more deeply, because the rest, like from verse 7 and on, talks about how God is going to judge by, flooding the earth, right? Flooding all the earth, and Noah found favor in his eyes. He was the only righteous person at that time, right? And that's kind of like the rest of Genesis chapter 6, right? And this is where God has told Noah to build the new ark and what to put in the ark and stuff like that too. So, these are kind of more of the basic information that most of us do know anyways. So we're going to end the Bible history here, man. We've only gone over like 6 chapters so far in the last 3 weeks, but hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. Would love to hear what you guys are thinking right now too. Okay, so there it is, guys. That is the end of the Bible history word study today. And let's move into the second break of the day.
To live with God in my heart. The tears you shed pray all night long. Your love and light at the break of dawn. The days when you were gone, your words stay here in my heart. I'll hold on to you tightly, Lord. Your word is your love, I'm not alone. Now even if this dark world is frightening, wind and waves and thunders crashing, no matter what, our love will not change. You're with me and I'm with you. I will always, always love you, no matter if the world forsakes you. From all the love and miracles through you, I've witnessed the truth. I'll fly high with you. I will never, never leave you, no matter if the world forsakes you. With all the love and blessings from you, I'll never forget all that you've done for me. live with God in my heart. I will not waver to wrong thoughts. I'll stay right here where I belong. You suffered all along. Your wounds lie deep in my heart. We'll guard you, Lord, till your pain's gone. We'll comfort you, so lie in our arms. Now even if this dark world is frightening, wind and waves and thunders crashing, no matter what, our love will not change. You're with me and I'm with you. I will always, always love you, no matter if the world forsakes you. Your love for God burns so brightly. Rise out of ashes, your light will set me free. I'll never leave you, no matter if the world forsakes you. With all the love and blessings from you, I'll never forget all that you've done for me.
Okay, so let's get into our final segment for today on Health is Happiness. We are doing a 3-part series on longevity. How can we live longer? And today, Julius is going to go over a segment on what is the ideal diet. What should we be eating? All right, everyone, please enjoy this. Learn a lot. Let's live longer so that we can run in this history even more. Everyone, please welcome Julius all the way over there in Australia with Health is Happiness.
Hi everyone, Julius here and welcome to the Health is Happiness segment. Today we're going to be continuing on with part 2 on the topic of longevity. So this is episode 23 and we're going to be talking about what should we be eating to give us the most longevity. Last week I talked about intermittent fasting and how it turns on these longevity genes that help our bodies live longer. There are 3 main longevity pathways. They're called mTOR, MPK, and sirtuins. They are all interlinked and influence each other, and today we're going to talk about how we can alter our diet to ensure that all 3 of these pathways are working in a way that will promote brain and body health. Let's start off by talking about mTOR. Now before I go on, much of the research I'll be sharing comes again from Dr. David Sinclair and some of it from Dr. Rhonda Patrick, both whom you can find easily on YouTube if you're interested in learning more. So mTOR is a particular molecule in the body that responds to the amount of amino acids, particularly leucine, isoleucine, and valine, present in the bloodstream. Now last time I only mentioned sirtuin's role in autophagy, but mTOR actually plays the most potent role in this process out of all the 3 longevity pathways. mTOR responds to low insulin and fasting, and in response, it mobilizes old proteins to be recycled and made into new proteins when you're hungry. Essentially, it's the garbage collection and trash recycling system of the cell. And that's particularly important for the brain, because as we get older, there are these misfolded proteins that begin to accumulate, which, as I mentioned in the previous episode, contribute to a lot of age-related diseases. Alzheimer's is a common example, which is indicated by biomarkers such as plaques and tangled proteins forming in the brain. To get rid of these things, you need a really deep cleansing. So, by downregulating mTOR, it turns on these recycling pathways really effectively. mTOR actually works together with another hormone called IGF-1, and both are very important for protein muscle synthesis, i.e. muscle growth. So, as you can tell, we do want these molecules present in our body. The issue, however, is that they also allow other things to grow other than just muscles. There are many studies that have shown that higher IGF-1, which is a growth hormone, is associated with higher cancer incidence. So how does this happen? So over time, you have accumulated damage in your cells. And once a cell reaches a certain stage, your body has this way of saying, this cell is too damaged to repair. We need to kill it. Otherwise, it can mutate and grow into a tumor. Dr. Ronda describes it as programmed cell death. So what IGF-1 does when it's constantly at high levels is it tells the cells to grow, grow, grow. Don't die. Thus, it overrides these checkpoints. So both healthy cells grow as well as the damaged cells grow. They go on to replicate tumors. So how do we downregulate these mTOR IGF-1 pathways through our diet? Fasting is one way, and the other way is by having low amounts of amino acids, particularly leucine, isoleucine, and valine in our bloodstream. These amino acids are highest in animal protein, particularly meats, and to be even more specific, red meat. So this is good for muscle building, but continuously having high amounts of meat keeps these growth hormones high in our bloodstream. So as you might guess, by having a plant-based diet or having a low to moderate consumption of meat in our diet will downregulate mTOR. So to be very clear, I'm not saying a high quality piece of steak is bad for you. As I said, you've got all your essential amino acids, plus iron and vitamin B12, which is vital for you to feel strong and energetic. There's lots of immediate benefits for lots of people by having meat quite frequently. However, it may come at the expense of longevity in the long run. It's not going to surprise anyone at this point for me to say that Sansanim also has said that eating mostly vegetarian and a moderate amount of meat is beneficial for health. As I said, having these growth hormones present in our body is not all bad. It's about balance. In fact, IGF-1 is involved in the process of neurogenesis, which helps the brain grow new neurons. As a side note, if we have a habit of exercising, then that IGF-1 that's increased in our bloodstream from protein consumption will be pushed into our brain and muscles, where it does all that good stuff, as opposed to just flowing around in our bloodstream and letting all sorts of other stuff grow which we don't want. Now, for those who are not bodybuilders out there, who just want a normal decent size amount of muscle, I don't think this is much of a problem to eat mostly plant-based. It may be a problem for those who might have autoimmune conditions or IBS. They might struggle with the amount of fiber in plant-based diets. With that being said, diet is something highly specific to your body, and people will react differently to certain foods. Not everyone can do plant-based, for similar reasons that I previously described. Now let's talk about AMPK and sitiurins. AMPK senses low energy, low amounts of glucose, and makes more energy and mitochondria and boosts NAD. And that's really important for sitiurins. They require NAD to be active. These pathways all work together interdependently. MPK turns up the metabolism. It also burns fat, and they repair DNA, clear out aging cells, and lower inflammation, among many other things. Now, sitiurins are central to brain health. What's important about sitiurins as opposed to the other two, mTOR and MPK, is that sitiurins respond to a whole variety of environmental persuasive stresses, and later you'll understand what I mean by that. Based on animal studies as well as human studies, they can slow down brain aging and eventually reverse some parts of it as well. There are several types of saturators, but we won't go in that deep in this discussion. What's important to know is that the levels of saturators go down with aging, and also the fuel it requires, called NAD. So we need to find a way to replace the NAD that's missing. When a cell is overstressed, overbroke, and overdamaged, the saturators have two jobs. They have to create these bundles of DNA and make sure that the cell maintains its identity. And this is important so that the genes can be read like a disk or software in a computer. When chromosomes break up or you crush a cell, there's a panic attack, and the saturators rush to help the stress and repair the broken DNA. But then they have to find their way back to where they came from and reestablish that structure of the epigenome. And they do a pretty good job of that 99% of the time. But the 1% of the genes never go back to the way they were, and over time, this accumulates. Now, Dr. David Sinclair mentioned that some supplements that he takes to counteract these declines, but that was out of my purview, so I will focus more on the diet side. So, as I mentioned previously, a predominantly plant-based diet is most ideal for these longevity pathways to be most active. Something like 80% plant-based to 20% meat was recommended by Dr. David Sinclair. So you don't have to go full vegan if you don't want to. In terms of the studies that have been done, in over a dozen studies, it was found a Mediterranean type diet protects the brain from aging and can even reverse aspects of the aging in the elderly with mild cognitive impairments. There was also a really large international research group led by this professor called Tommaso Boldrini. It showed higher adherence to a healthy diet, in this case the Mediterranean diet, is associated with less biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease. So what's in this diet that chemically helps the brain? Now, I'm not recommending any alcohol here, but red wine was one of those things because it has polyphenols. Among the polyphenols, resveratrol is one of them. And Dr. Sinclair's lab had been working on resveratrol for many years. He found that it directly activates certain saturators. Resveratrol can also be found in blueberries, cranberries, grapes, and mulberry on the skin of these fruits. The other component of the Mediterranean diet that really works on saturators is olive oil. Recently, it was shown that if you add oleic acid, which is a major component of olive oil, and is also found in avocados and other foods, it can also directly activate this enzyme. Also, when picking the plants to eat, pick those that have undergone particular stresses from environmental exposure. And you can visibly see these by the ones that have a lot of color in them when you're buying them. Eating these plants tricks the body into activating these saturators, which is what's special about them. So what happens is your body worries that your food supply might run out by these foods mimicking the stresses that the plants went through in the body. That's the sort of overarching nature of a more plant-based diet, whether it's Mediterranean diet or something equivalent like the Japanese Okinawa diet. It has low levels of protein, mostly plant-based, so your body has to work a little bit harder to get everything it needs, and this mimics adversity sending signals that maybe times aren't so good, and we need to activate these longevity pathways. That's the difference between that and a high-fat carnivorous diet. That's very common in the West. We eat lots of meat and lots of fat. They're packed full of calories, amino acids, and a whole bunch of other stuff that tells the body times are good, so there's no need to protect ourselves. Now, with that being said, no diet is perfect, And there are certain things you want to keep in mind if somebody wanted to try just a plant-based diet with little to no animal protein sources. The hardest thing about a plant-based diet is you have to eat a high volume of food and a variety of different protein sources to get all the essential amino acids you need. So it's more challenging if you're trying to build lots of muscle. Next, you have to be mindful of low iron, which will make you anemic, and also B vitamin deficiencies, particularly B12. This is the supplementation that's actually given to pregnant women because they often are low in folic acid. If you have deficiency in B12, that will mess up your epigenome and you will likely have low energy, and it's very likely to accelerate the clock in a way that accelerates aging. There are also lots of studies that have shown that deficiencies in B12 accelerate a variety of other diseases. Heart diseases is a major one, but also dementia in the brain. The other thing, before I move on to fatty acids, you can supplement B12 from nutritional yeast or taking some supplements. The other thing that's important on a plant-based diet is really making sure that you're getting the right kinds of fatty acids. Now, this is particularly if you're concerned about brain health, which even in a normal diet, you don't often get enough of these omega-3 fatty acids. These are the type that we don't make ourselves in the body. If you don't eat fish, you're not getting a lot of them. You can find them in salmon, mackerel, krill, and sardines. These are good sources of omega-3s, and they're giving us the DHAs and EPAs that we need. You can also get them from flaxseed, walnuts, chia seeds, but that will depend on your body's ability to process these nuts. The omega-3s actually form a structural component of the brain which protects it from inflammation and damage. Also, the monosaturated fatty acids called oleic acid, which I previously mentioned, is really important, and it's a component of olive oil and avocados, which provide such additional benefits. So that's it for today's episode. I really hope that helps in figuring out what someone can eat if you wanted to improve your longevity. If you'd like me to elaborate on any particular points, please drop a comment below. Next episode will be the third and final part of this series and will be focused on hair and skin. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.
And thank you so much, Julius, for another wonderful episode of Health is Happiness on the ideal diet. And of course, this is on longevity. Everyone, I hope that everyone lives long, and prospers, just like the Vulcans say over there in the Star Trek episodes. Everyone, enjoy your Wednesday service tonight, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow, which is Q&A Thursday, on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with this